Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is In the Studio, episode 96. So, today I have a fun little technique to share with you. I'm going to show you how to introduce some movement and interesting stereo effects using some controlled randomness that can really bring life to a stale or stagnant part in your track, that needs a little life, needs a little bit of movement, motion, and interest. So we'll get to that in a second. First, I have some news. My remix of Jerem Isma's and Alistair's Kubrick is now available on all major platforms. So the link's down in the description. I'm going to give you a little preview of the track. Your support is greatly appreciated, and then we'll hop right into the technique. So here you go. All right, so let's jump right in here. This technique can be used on a variety of different elements. It's just worth experimenting with on all kinds of sounds, maybe effect sounds, vocals, like synth hits. I'm using it on a little percussion loop here today, but definitely feel free to get creative with the sources that you try this on. So here's the percussion loop. Super simple. So let's hop into the mixer here. And I'm actually going to rename this just a perk loop there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this to 3 different tracks. So I'm going to label this one perk dry. I'm going to pan this one left. I'm going to pan this one right. So on the original perk loop here, I'm going to unroute that from the master. So we have this dry track here, which is going just straight out to the master, and then 2 other copies. One's panned left, one's panned right. I've mentioned this in multiple other videos. The reason I'm using 3 tracks, or 4 tracks in this case, is to avoid any latency. So what I want to do here is put a like 2 different reverbs on the left and the right, or maybe even like a delay on the left and a reverb on the right. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But I think on the left channel, I'm just going to put on a delay here. And I'm going to take it off tempo sync and maybe go for something short, like maybe around 100 milliseconds. And I'm just going to leave that there. I might maybe add a little saturation to it. That's it. And we'll just rename this delay. And then on the right channel, I'm going to add some reverb. And I might just use the convolution reverb, the Fruity Convolver here. And I'll just keep it on its default setting for right now. I'll call this verb. I actually might, on the delay track as well, just add a really subtle ambience. So I'll turn the mix down to around, 15% or so. Maybe turn this back to, a half of a second. Okay. So what I want to do, I don't need that one there. So what I want to do here is I want to use an LFO to control the send level of these two auxiliary tracks here. So on the perk loop, I'm going to add a peak controller, and I'm going to right click on the send amount to the delay, go link to controller, and we're going to select the LFO that we just added from the peak controller, and that's going to control the send amount going into that delay. And this is where I'm going to introduce the randomness. I'm going to turn this to a random wave, random, and okay, and that's just doing its own thing there, just random send amounts going into the delay on the left side. Now I'm just going to keep this tidy. I'm going to right click here. Oops, I don't want that. I'm going to rename this just so we rename, and I'm just going to call this delay send LFO. Now I'm going to do another one for the right side with the reverb. So I'm going to go peak controller again. We're going to right click and link to controller the send amount on the verb on the right side. So let's go link to controller. We'll do the same thing we just did. That's not what I want. And we're going to go right here. Oop, not peak. LFO, that's what we want. Okay. Turn the bass up a little bit. Turn it to random. I turn the speed up a little bit. And the mix is probably a little bit too loud, but it's just going to really make that perk loop much more interesting. It works well if you put two reverbs, a different reverb on the left and a different reverb on the right to create a nice, sense of stereo width and interest. Adjust these levels a little bit. I might just mess around with this first LFO, maybe turn up speed down a little bit. And then what you can also do, and like I said, this doesn't work well on every single sound, but I find on certain little background loops and effects and like little vocal hits and things like that, something that you just want a little bit of like randomness and movement, it can really work well. So I'm going to hop back to the perk loop, and this one I'm going to rename this where am I here? We'll just go verb send LFO, and then what you could also do is maybe control these a little bit, like maybe have these set kind of working in a certain like range, and you can do that just using, you know, the volume amount on the LFO and the bass, and then you can modulate the LFOs with another LFO to create, you know, to make sure they're kind of moving in opposite directions and in different timings. So let's do that really quick. I'm going to add another peak controller, not the formula controller. I'm all over the place here. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first delay send LFO and I'm going to link the volume of that to the new LFO we just added. So be this one here, accept. So now what I can do is I'm going to keep this on a sine wave this time, and I might turn the speed. I could right click here and set it to, you know, maybe 64 steps. Turn that bit. So you can kind of control like how intense, you know, the range of the randomness is going to be on the left side, and then kind of do something that's going to complement it on the right. So it's you're not getting too crazy of a sound. You can really kind of dial it in and control that randomness a little bit. And then so what I can do is add another peak or formula controller, another LFO. I keep adding the formula controller. It's not what I want. Peak controller. Could add another one and do the same thing for the other side. So we can take the verb send LFO, right click, and link to controller on the volume on that one, just like we did before. And then use this one. And this one we can set to a different speed. So we can set this one to 32 steps perhaps. Turn the bass up, so then set your range. Yeah, and then you can, you know, that second step isn't necessary to control the LFOs with another LFO, but I find it can kind of help you make the randomness complement each other a little bit easier. And yeah, just an easy way to inject a little randomness, some interesting stereo effects. It sounds a little bit odd just on its own, but trust me, I've tried this in tracks. It does work well. Not on all elements, but it does work. So um, give it a try, experiment with it. Adds a little bit of interesting flavor and movement to you know, little hits and background loops and things like that can really work well on. So that's the video for today. A little bit of randomness. So leave me a comment, leave me a question. Love to hear from everyone as always. So I'll catch you later. Take care.